Archaeologists are constantly finding proof of places in the Bible that critics of the Bible said didn't even exist, or events that happened in the Bible that critics say never happened. For example, the crossing at the Red Sea, where God parted the Red Sea and let the Jews walk across on dry land, and then the Pharaoh's army chased them, and then he drowned Pharaoh's army in the Red Sea. Exodus 14, and the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went in after them to the midst of the sea, even all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And it came to pass that in the morning watch the Lord looked unto the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and the cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians, and took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily, so that the Egyptians said, Let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians. And the Lord said unto Moses, Stretch out thine hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen. And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea returned to his strength when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled against it, and the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, and all the host of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. There remained not so much as one of them. Now, here's a drawing from the same time period of an Egyptian chariot wheel, so you know what it looks like. And here's the same kind of chariot wheel stuck in the sand at the bottom of the Red Sea. And here's some more chariot wheels at the bottom of the Red Sea. These are covered with coral. Here's another one covered with coral. And they've also found people's bones, human bones, at the bottom of the Red Sea. No doubt the bones of the Egyptians. That bone on the right there has been mineralized because it's been on the bottom of the ocean so long. They also found horse bones. This is a horse hoof. It's been shrunken a little because it's been drying out or whatever. And that's from the Old Testament, but what about the New Testament? Well, I'm going to read some quotes from people who have studied the historicity of the New Testament. E.M. Blakelock of Auckland University, professor of classics. My approach to classics is historical, and I tell you that the evidence for the life, the death, and the resurrection of Christ is better authenticated than most of the facts of ancient history. Clark Pinnock of McMaster University said, Skepticism regarding the historical credentials of Christianity is based on an irrational bias. F.F. Bruce of Manchester University said, If the New Testament were a collection of secular writings, their authenticity would generally be regarded as beyond all doubt. Professor Thomas Arnold, author of History of Rome and chair of modern history at Oxford, said, I have been used for many years to study the histories of other times and to examine and weigh the evidence of those who have written about them, and I know of no one fact in the history of mankind which is proved by better and fuller evidence of every sort to the understanding of a fair inquirer than that Christ died and rose again from the dead. Classical Roman historian A.N. Sherwin White For the New Testament, the confirmation of historicity is overwhelming. Any attempt to reject its basic historicity, even in matters of detail, must now appear absurd. Roman historians have long taken it for granted. Dr. Terry Watkins, in his article, The Resurrection of Jesus Christ, Fact or Fiction, ab1611.org. Dr. Greenleaf, the Royal Professor of Law at Harvard University, was one of the greatest legal minds that ever lived. He wrote the famous legal volume entitled A Treatise on the Law of Evidence, considered by many the greatest legal volume ever written. Dr. Simon Greenleaf believed the resurrection of Jesus Christ was a hoax. He determined once and for all to expose the myth of the resurrection. After thoroughly examining the evidence for the resurrection, Dr. Greenleaf came to the exact opposite conclusion. He wrote a book entitled An Examination of the Testimony of the Four Evangelists by the Rules of Evidence Administered in the Courts of Justice, in which he emphatically stated, "It was impossible that the apostles could have persisted in affirming the truths they had narrated had not Jesus Christ actually risen from the dead." Greenleaf concluded that according to the jurisdiction of legal evidence, the resurrection of Jesus Christ was the best supported event in all of history. Josh McDowell, in Evidence for the Resurrection. William F. Albright, who in his day was the world's foremost biblical archaeologist, said, "We can already say emphatically that there is no longer any solid basis for dating any book of the New Testament after about AD 80. In other words, the people who wrote the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the people who wrote them were there. They were eyewitnesses. They knew what they were writing about. Sir William Ramsay, who spent 15 years attempting to undermine Luke's credentials as a historian and to refute the reliability of the New Testament, finally concluded, "Luke is a historian of the first rank. This author should be placed along with the very greatest of historians." Both Jewish and Roman sources and traditions admit an empty tomb, because Jesus rose from the dead and left his tomb. Those resources range from Josephus to a compilation of 5th century Jewish writings called the Toledoth Jeshu. Dr. Paul Mayer calls this positive evidence from a hostile source, which is the strongest kind of historical evidence. In essence, this means that if a source admits a fact decidedly not in its favor, then that fact is genuine. Mayer observes that, if all the evidence is weighed carefully and fairly, it is indeed justifiable, according to the canons of historical research, to conclude that the sepulchre of Joseph of Arimathea, in which Jesus was buried, was actually empty on the third day. And no shred of evidence has yet been discovered in literary sources, epigraphy, or archaeology that would disprove this statement.